Did you know that 85% of your engine wear occurs at startup? Yes, that is correct, and this is where Lower the Friction comes in by putting a protective, lubricating barrier on all moving parts. This now gives you full-time protection to make your engine last longer, run smoother, give you better performance, and improve fuel economy. People across the country are reporting some very exciting results. Go to lowerthefriction.com, place your order, and enter in promo code SOS to get 5% off of your order. That's lowerthefriction.com. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the weekly Secrets of Saturn livestream. I am Jason Lindgren, your host. We've got a great packed house this week. Let's start with our new person stepping in. That would be Mr. Mark Bloom from England. Mark, say hello to everyone out there.
Hi, hello.
Coming all the way from the United Kingdom. Mark, why don't you give a little bit about yourself before we bring in everyone else?
Okay. So as Jason said, I'm from Liverpool, England. I'm 28 years old. I'm one of them millennials. A lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight I've received from lecturers at university, which I know some people can be a bit skeptical about the education system, and understandably so. But the information I have has actually now been removed from the curriculum entirely, and all of my lecturers were also made redundant or forced to leave through sort of dirty tactics. Like, one got accused of being sexist, that sort of thing. They put out an email saying, would anyone like to come forward and suggest that this person has marked them down based on their gender. And it didn't work because the female members of staff stood up for them, and it was blatant nonsense. But this is what they were trying to do, because making someone redundant meant that...
Mark, hold that
thought.
We're
not live?
Hold that thought. D-Live is working and everybody is streaming and nothing else is. So why is YouTube...
YouTube's not streaming.
YouTube's being YouTube. All right, let me see what the hell is the problem here.
YouTube was working for me.
Well, I had my roundabout with YouTube today.
They're like, oh, that crow guy? Yeah, fuck you.
6 hours of my life.
But D-Live is hearing us. So D-Live, we apologize for making you sit through this, because I got to fix this real quick if it's even possible.
No, YouTube is okay, Jason. I was even listening to the song earlier when it started, so I know
you heard
it is working.
Rose, you heard the feed, because everyone in the chat saying, no, nothing.
That's what I'm looking
it's not
at.
happening.
I'm looking at the chat right now, and everyone's saying it's fine. Maybe you guys are looking at the wrong link. I'm looking at Secrets of Saturn, 149 people watching, February 24th, Signs and Symbols, and everyone's saying, all good, yes, all good, hear you perfectly, YouTube's fine, it's fine, YouTube's good.
Oh, I'm on
We're good.
56 February 24, 2021, Signs and Symbols, 43 waiting. Weird.
You guys are on the wrong link. Come and join us over here in the real world, guys.
Wow. All right, someone pick me a new link.
Reality time.
Yeah, I need a new link. Because
I'm doing it. Here, you guys.
Yeah,
it's a good thing I came today.
Right. I pulled this from the social media link.
Yeah, so did I.
I got nothing playing on my link here either. So.
I just sent you the chat. Don't worry. Everyone is hearing everything we're saying. I promise.
Even though we're streaming, this is very odd, because Restream says everything's working and online.
And that says it's empty right now when I try to hit your link. That's so weird.
But on my YouTube thingy-majiggy, it says no data.
It's because you created 2 links probably, and there is a correct one that's fully functional right now.
Ah, here it is. There's the correct one. That's operating.
Wow. Look at that.
Nothing
Holy-
but pure professionalism here, folks.
Wow. That's
Bear with us.
awesome.
So I don't recall making 2 of these, so let me check my YouTube studio.
But isn't it great that it's working and that we're having a show?
We're having a show, but I can't see the correct... See, now this one says live. Let me click on this one.
Yes, it's the greatest show on earth.
Yeah. I clicked on the one from the social media link and it went to the one where there was like 46 waiting. Now there's 117 in the actual one.
So this replicated
Thank you,
itself in
Rose.
some weird way. I don't even know how
Yeah.
that happened.
Bizarre.
Today, YouTube has not enjoyed our team.
Well, since everybody's
Because
listening
Crow
to us,
777
big
had
fools of
issues as
ourselves,
well.
Crow, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody what they did to us earlier? Maybe Crow's
Crow.
not here.
He might have gone.
I could say what happened.
Oh, yeah,
but
you
let-
go ahead. I'm just trying to
explain
get
it.
this set up so I can actually see everybody and communicate.
Yes, well, while we're waiting for Crow to come back, what happened is for hours we were waiting for YouTube to
I'm
approve-
here, guys, but I
Okay.
can hear
Oh, there
10
he
people
is.
talking.
So you're listening to multiple tabs at once. So just why don't you close out all of your browsers because you don't have to worry about leaving Skype and then reopen a browser and actually close all your browsers and then click on the YouTube link from Skype and that will be the only thing that opens. So
Thank you.
what happened was we had a hard time trying to get it to upload, and when it finally did upload, there was 19 ads for a 56-minute video, which is a 911 encode. And so we were trying to get the ads to stop, and there was just all sorts of problems. No comments, no views, no likes. So after a couple hours, we deleted it and re-uploaded it, and now it's working.
Okay, so check
Strange
this out.
things are afoot.
I do have 2 of them. I didn't create 2 of them, and one is monetized and one is not. How odd. But anyway, I'm going to get over to...
Gremlins.
Let me fix this so it doesn't kick us off. Yeah, it's none of my settings are here either. This is really strange. All right, enable... Yeah. No, it's not made for kids. Okay, so let's fix this.
Not as weird as my channel going live twice in a week without me. I was driving down the road and I got a message on my phone that says you're live, and I'm like, the hell? I ran home. Took me 15 minutes to stop the stream. Yeah, and YouTube wouldn't fix it. I hit their guys for like 2 weeks, their tech support, and they're like, we don't know what's going on. Like, cool,
never do.
thanks, appreciate that. Yeah, they're happy
All
guys
right,
over there.
so let's just plunge into this. We won't be nice about it. So today we've got me, Rose 777, the Great Baldini, Crow 777, Wayne McCroy, and Mark Bloom. And we are going to talk about signs and symbols in modern music, which is where Mark Bloom comes in. Apparently he went to school for this before they kicked that to the curb and smashed its teeth in. So, Mark, where do you want to begin here? This is something that we're all familiar with. We've all broken stuff down. It's very obvious. They're so blatant about it nowadays when they dance around their underpants with devil horns and spitting fire at everybody. And they're just kind of like, hey, I worship Satan. You know, that kind of crap. But
Yeah, it's got
They
a
used to
lot
be a little
more
more
obvious
subtle about
since
it.
I was at university. I know that this is very similar to a few weeks back. You guys took a look at the iPet Goat video, and what you were doing there was like the sort of average lesson I had at university for popular music studies. We started off with visual because that's much easier, and then you can move on to audio. And this is where I think the idea was my lecturers, they were trying to establish a methodology of analysis for popular music, because prior to the 1980s, people were just using classical music measurements like for popular music, which obviously doesn't translate too well. And so it's very similar to what you were doing with the iPet Goat video, where you're sort of looking at the details, but instead of looking, you're listening to some of the different vertical layering of the tracks, which is where the first document I mentioned before, the notes on semiotic analysis, sort of comes in just about there. If you want to start that one.
All right, so we're going to start with your thing on Brian Longhurst, Texts and Meanings. That's where we want to start.
Right, that's from, just for the people listening, that's from a book called Popular Music and Society by Brian Longhurst.
All right, let's go through this and then we'll start tearing it apart. This first text is an argument presented by Brian Longhurst on the musicological approaches to analyzing popular music, using Richard Middleton's work as an example. In this text, Longhurst highlights the neglect musicology has had towards popular music in three main areas: terminology, methodology, and ideology. Each area is elaborated upon, explaining how they lean towards Western classical music as more attention is paid to harmony, tonality, and the notation of music. In popular music, rhythm and timbre are often important factors. Also, most popular music isn't notated at least until after the release of the recording, as more attention is often given to the performance, recorded aspects of the music, as opposed to the initial writing composition. The methods provided further into this text are of more use to my own analysis. I copied and pasted this from an analysis that was done in the university by Mark, just so everybody knows. As Longhurst explains, alternate methods for the analysis of popular music, the study of semiotics, and the four dimensions in approach to structure. The first structural dimension Longhurst provides is let me see if I say this right, syntagmatic, or in short, the syntax. This is the form of the song or song structure. For example, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, which is commonly referred to as A-B, C-B, or pop form in popular music studies. And I completely agree with that, by the way, because I do write songs that are poppy-ish. Sometimes the syntax is indicative of a genre depending on the form used, as certain genres are often presented through specific song forms, like strophic verse form, which is a common feature throughout folk and blues music. However, the members of Tool right now are laughing at us about verse and chorus. The next dimension is generative. This is where the interrelations of the music generate thought, mood, or feeling. These musical interrelations can be horizontal or vertical, meaning what and how instruments, vocals are used together in smaller units of the song or in sequence throughout the song. The next dimension, processual, relates to the previous two dimensions, as when generated thoughts, moods, or feelings recur or develop throughout the song, depending on the syntax it often creates, continues a story, or theme. Anything contributing to this development, from a guitar riff to a recurring line in the lyrics, can be described as processual. The last dimension is paradigmatic, or the paradigm. This is a specific moment in a song that stands out to the listener as being something of significance, or a special moment in the music. A paradigmatic moment is often a short and singular moment within the song, and can be anything from the voice to any of the instruments or other recorded sounds. How or when the moment occurs can determine the moment as paradigmatic too, meaning it can be a thing that recurs throughout the song, but due to the how and when, it can be described as paradigmatic in one of its instances over the others. All right. So that's good. I like that breakdown. Definitely applies to pop music, and being somebody who's recorded music and things like that, you're right. A lot of times the writing and all that the more specifics of putting it on paper and selling tablature books and things like that comes later. Studio musicians will often use, as Baldini will tell you, things called charts, which is, here's the key, it goes in this structure, but it may not be every single note.
Chart.
Right. So those kinds of things happen in more popular music, or even jazz, things like that. But anyway, I don't want to talk over everybody, so whoever wants to take this, go right ahead.
Do you want me to jump in first?
Sure, go ahead.
Right. So this is kind of this will be the foundation. Like you said, you're already familiar with this. Presumably, the majority of people in the live chat are already used to this, or at least if not, they'll recognize it now listening to music. so this is kind of like the familiarity aspect of popular music recordings. Is the I think I put pop form, which was the verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. So everyone listening will to popular music will already know, when listening to most chart music, you'll already know when the chorus is coming and the bridge section or the mid-late, whatever you want to call it. So with that familiarity, it's people if you think about it in terms of psychology, I've just listened to the Freud and Jung episodes that you guys did on Crow 777. And when you think about the psychological aspect of people being more receptive to an idea if they're already pre-familiarized with it. So if you put something, I think Baldini says the Overton window, the idea of taking something that's not acceptable and sort of slowly over time gradually pushing it, you can see how using pop form or verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, something that people are familiar with, if you can put something within that context over time, it can be more accepted by the public, the listening public. Like I think I've heard you mention before, like it's crazy that someone like Cardi B with her, say, lyrical content can sell records and gain a following. But when you think about the setting that all that content is in, it's not too surprising in a way, because people are already familiar with about 90% of the content there. So like that last 10% is they can stomach it. It's like that Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. People are used to the sugar, so they don't mind the medicine. Or poison.
Yeah. And to kind of go hand in hand with that, a great study in this, one of the things that got me into this whole area of recording and musicality from a technical standpoint is very early on reading a book on neuropsychology and what's called acoustics, psychoacoustics, basically a physiological response that you have to sound. It's a fairly complex study. However, there's a great book called This Is Your Brain on Music. And the guy who wrote it, Daniel Levitin, both a fairly noted producer and a neuropsychologist. While some of the stuff is poppycock, he does do a great job of walking through essentially what makes not only a good song, but what attracts us to it. And I think this is a great example here, is that there are rules in music that we're familiar with. Most of us know Western music, Western modern music. There are other forms of music, but there are rules, and it is the breaking of those rules slightly to bring a little surprise that kind of makes a hook. But it's those rules that makes if you break those rules too far, we don't find it very pleasurable. And I noted in the chat, right, there's a difference between those who just kind of this music sort of flows out of them, but it's based on the rules that they've already learned, and then you can analyze it. Much of the stuff that we see from the Tavistokian aspect is very well constructed. For example, Mark's from Liverpool, the stomping grounds of the Beatles. I think most of us can agree that pretty much none of that stuff was written by those four lads. Maybe I Want to Hold Your Hand, right? Maybe
what do you mean we didn't write it? You cock you.
Right. Yeah, right. But yes, by the time you get to Day in the Life and that sort of stuff, it is a very, very different set. Pardon me?
We can work it out. That one's we looked at that one in university, and my lecturer said that's the best Beatles song. And when I was listening to it, I remember thinking,
that is a good one.
This was quite an early song, and that's like, it changes time signature and everything. And I remember sitting there thinking, how did Paul McCartney write that?
That was, it's interesting that you say that, Mark, because that was right at the time when everything was doing like their little switch over from we're the live bubblegum sugary pop group to, hey, we're going to be really good in the studio and write some serious albums now that are cutting edge and going after the social engineering aspects of everything. We're going to push psychedelia and all that to really new levels, really. Like they were some of the key players behind that, because right behind that you get bands like Pink Floyd and all them starting that. So the Beatles seem to be the groundwork, and that 66-ish time was really like that key moment when they stopped writing things like I Want to Hold Your Hand And this is like Rubber Soul. So for anybody who's a Beatles fan, what we're talking about is Rubber Soul, which is the last album they would have played anything live from. And then in between that and to Revolver, which is the first studio album, they're like, we're done. We're not playing live anymore. We're just a studio band. This is also, ironically, and I'm not going to get into this tonight because it's a whole freaking tome by itself. This is also the time when said James Paul McCartney may have died and been replaced, which is around 1966-ish. Same time periods, but anyway.
That's right. And also, I'm not too sure about Tavistock, but I know that what's the CEO of Apple Corps? He's dead now, but
Steve Jobs.
No.
Sorry. The other Apple.
Apple Corps.
That Apple, silly. The other one.
I always blank on his name when I need to remember it.
What was the question, though? I didn't quite catch that.
The CEO of Apple Corps.
I don't actually know.
Is that originally the manager that died? Is that who you're referencing?
Talking about Brian Epstein?
No, but Brian Epstein was involved.
Neil? Is that Neil Aspinall?
Neil Aspinall.
Jeff Jones?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Neil Aspinall, that's
Okay.
the one.
Right.
So very early on in the late 1950s, he was actually involved with the Beatles right back then, before Ringo was even in the band, because the Beatles actually didn't start in the Cavern. They started in the Casbah, which I've been to, and I've seen the photographs and, the newspaper cuttings, and I've met Neil Aspinall has a son who is Pete Best's, the original drummer for the Beatles, Pete Best's half brother Rogue, who now manages the Casbah. And Rogue was, this is online, I'm not spilling any family secrets or anything, this can be read online, but Rogue was born out of an affair because his mum was actually the manager of the Casbah and was technically the first manager of the Beatles unofficially. And so Neil Aspinall and Brian Epstein kind of came in and swindled the Beatles from her, because she suggested bringing them to the Cavern, because the Cavern was going to close down because they were a jazz club. They didn't want rock and roll bands playing. And so I've been told by Rogue that it was Neil Aspinall, his dad, and Brian Epstein and two other men in suits. And if I was to guess, I'd probably say they were Tavistock, maybe. But this was 1959, 1960.
Right. Yeah. I've never been sure about how all this would have gone down, because the Beatles are such a unique, just everything. Right. There's just so much about them. Like if it was groundbreaking, the Beatles did it at the time, and no one's really matched it. I mean, the studio stuff is one of the things I'm really big into, because I'm a gear nerd, and that's the thing that impresses me the most, is what was going on and how they pushed things to a new level. Now, whether they were writing the songs or not, well, obviously you can debate that. But nothing changes the fact that they got very, very clever in the studio, and they were blowing people's minds at the time. So these kinds of things weren't done before, especially Sgt. Pepper. That was the one that really blew everyone's marbles, because they kept bouncing tracks back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with two separate 4-track machines. So people weren't even thinking in these terms for the most part yet. And then they came out with that, and they were just like, holy shit, look what people can do if you take the time.
You have to remember as well, I mean, I know this firsthand, but they were purported to be 4 poor boys from Liverpool, and having grown up working class in Liverpool in the modern day, where we have a much better economy because of the Beatles and the football clubs here, I can honestly say, the recording techniques and the songwriting, I'm not sure how, from a perspective of working class Liverpool in the 1950s, when they were growing up and Liverpool was a backwater because we got bombed hell out of during World War II. There weren't too many studios knocking about.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Do we want to move on to the next part, or anybody else want to throw something in there on this section?
I would just throw in, take note that there's actually 4 different distinct parts to this whole formula here. And that's a very important idea to keep in mind as well. This harkens back to things like elemental ideas, once again, the four cardinal directions, this kind of thing. So when you're looking at this, and you could break this down into four different aspects here and use these to scientifically produce a song and actually, steer it into something that becomes a hit. Just using this specific formula and giving it this type of life or energy behind it, there's something kind of alchemical going on there, isn't there? And that's kind of a direction we could look at with this, because when you're talking about frequency, vibration, sound, acoustics, all these different ideas, and as Baldini mentioned, that book, Psychoacoustics, or things relating to psychoacoustics, this is a very real field. And, music does have a very definitive effect on the human mind.
Absolutely.
So,
and it
knowing that, it could... Go ahead.
Well, just say quickly. No, just say quickly. It's one of the. It's the only thing that we know of that bypasses the limbic system, that comes through the senses, but that bypasses the limbic system and goes directly hardwired to the music center of the brain. It does kind of backflow through it, but you can use it to embed anything you want, because it goes right past the limbic system, which is the first stop for anything that comes into your senses and gets compared against prior experience, and that's where you begin to do pattern recognition. It bypasses that altogether. So very, very powerful is music in so many different ways.
Right. It's kind of like a back door to the unconscious mind in a way.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, when you keep that in mind, I mean, there's very many different programming motifs that could be used through music. That's why the music industry is so obsessed with the occult and, all these different aspects of things. I'm kidding, right? Yeah, no, of course not. It's perfectly normal for, Beyonce to go up on stage with devil horns on and, fire all around and,
it's artistic,
worshiping the devil and all of that stuff.
She arts very well.
It's all just for show. It's very artsy. It's all just for show. There's nothing behind it.
No, performance art. Yeah,
it is. It's art. It's performance art. Of course it is. But yeah, at any rate, that's kind of the thing. I mean, when you look at the basics behind this whole premise, you could see there's a very real formula here in order to affect the mind in a certain way. Using music, the sound, the audio frequencies, this kind of thing. And you can see how they have this hook that they put in there too, through these different methods here. And I don't know all the proper words. I got to learn these words. So
these are very obscure.
I understand the concept. I'm not familiar with the vernacular per se, the particular vernacular or the jargon here, but I totally get the concept, and it's true. Like they create this certain rhythm process that pulls the mind in, and then there's certain parts, which is what the paradigmatic part, where they put something significant there, and this is kind of the hook that creates this back door into the unconscious mind.
Absolutely. There's so many aspects to that too, Wayne. Like you'll find that many popular music is either at around 60 beats a minute, which is about a resting heart rate, or double that, 120 beats per minute is a very popular tempo, or right in that neighborhood. And then you'll find that some of them will speed it up a little bit, right? And you'll find it pushes forward a little bit. There's a variety of different things that can be done. One of the most popular chord progressions throughout, for example, through the 50s and 60s was a 1-6-2-5 progression, which has a very simple resolve to it, and easily pulls people in and makes things very memorable. And you'll find that many commercials, harking back to Bernays, many commercials are, as you know, just reworded. They set just new words over simple tunes, melodies that you already know. In fact, there's a Cheers episode about that. Pardon me?
Owen Benjamin did the same, didn't he? He had a joke in his live set where he would play the same four chords, the ones used in Let It Be, the Beatles' Let It Be.
In fact, there is. Yep. In fact, I just posted a YouTube video about that today. I'd have to probably find the link. But a comedic band from Australia that does 61 songs. Yeah, 61 songs in a medley of those same four chords of all these top 40 hits, based on that the same chord arrangement, which is I think a
1-5-6-4.
1-5-6-4. Yeah, exactly. And so, but all of them. Right,
let's explain that, because because the people who aren't into music, let's like.
Oh, sure.
So
yeah,
1,
real
5, 6,
quickly-
4. What we're talking about is a chord progression, but you're probably better at the classical side of things. So let's explain what exactly that means, because it
yeah, real
is
quickly,
absolutely
just-
used in popular music in general. Like
everything.
these guys know this stuff, especially when you're talking about multi-million-dollar productions. They know what to put in where to hook the mind.
Sure. Yeah.
It always works.
And the chord progressions basically is the arrangements of chords in relation to one another. So when you have for example, a major chord, if you have a triad, it's a 1, 3 to 5. Those are relationships, tonal relationships to one another. And there are in Western music, there are 7 notes plus the 8, which is the octave. And when you put those together, a major progression, if you use triads, the 1 is always major, 2 is minor, 3 is minor, 4 is major, 5 is major, 6 is minor, and 7 is augmented chord, which pulls you back into the. And so you can. It doesn't matter what key it is. You can just say a 1, 6, 2, 5, and those relationships will always remain the same to each other. And so a 6 would be then if it's in a major key, the 1, 6, 2, 5, 1 is going to be the major tonic, the 6 is going to be the 6 minor, and so forth. And you can play that in any key. Those relationships will remain to one another, and they have a very familiar sound. So whenever this is what we do in the studio when we write charts, for example, that's just kind of the relationship that you use. You just say it's a 1, 6, 2, 5 in G, right? At about 86 beats a minute and go. And pretty much everybody can play that because they understand those relationships. But it's a common shorthand that we would use, but it's just relationships to one another. So all tones and semitones in Western music based on Pythagorean theory, which is a ratio to one another. And so those intervals then become kind of set in modern music, Western music. We use a tempered tuning scale, give a few cents, take a few cents, but that gives us that 12 semitones, and then you combine those into a variety of different ways. But there's some standard stuff that's used all throughout modern pop music, which is typically pretty simple, 3 or 4 chords. ZZ Top and AC/DC put out tons of albums with 3 chords, man. That's it.
And you love
Yeah, it's
them.
basically all the
5
same
notes.
song with different words.
Pretty much, yeah, exactly.
It's
AC/DC
amazing how it
admits it
always
too.
works.
So somebody
Somehow.
asked for, let me see, Jay Armstrong's asking for an example of the tunes. I assume he means, like what's a good example of some pop
Jay
songs that would
Armstrong's a
fall
girl,
in?
by the way.
Sorry?
A woman. Sorry. Shauna.
Oh, my bad.
An example.
We
would
hung out
be,
with her at Freeman Fly's house.
My
recently.
bad. That's right. Yep.
Everyone can imagine the chord progression 1, 5, 6, 4 as if you imagine the opening piano to Let It Be by the Beatles, that chord progression at the beginning. If you think
It's
about
like
that chord
F,
progression,
C,
that is 1, 5, 6,
G,
4.
A minor, I think it is.
That would be
it's in C. Yeah,
if it's in C,
C.
it'll be C, G, A minor, F.
Yeah, they do. I think they do it in C. So it's C, G, A minor, F. Give me a second here.
But I can't play it for you, or they'll strike my video down.
That's true. Don't do it, Baldini.
Yeah, Baldini, don't do that.
I was just gonna play I was just gonna bring the chords, but you can do the
No,
chords
don't
without
do
doing
that.
the time.
That's
See,
right.
it's the time signature that makes it recognizable. That's what the group from Australia did. Is you can double time it, right? They just put the chords in, and you can sing over it. But as long as you don't do the time, you should be in good shape. Let's see here. I'll find it. Just carry on. I can find it here.
You'll hear it in every song from now on anyway.
Yep.
It's good when you're a musician and you've got or a session musician and you see that chord progression on a sheet because you know exactly what you're doing for the next 3 minutes.
Exactly.
I'm a shitty musician, so I can't do these things. I just play by ear.
Yeah, I play by ear. I was in over my head when I got into university with 50% of the course being classical music, and you know, majority of my classmates were sort of classically trained from a young age. So
I had that
I was
same
lucky that I was
problem.
being taught this stuff.
All right.
I
So
know that feeling.
yeah. So with this quick setup, so if you're doing it in C, so the one is there's a major triad there, and then there's 5, 6, 4. Right, and so you can kind of hear where that goes, and that is the base of a bunch of different songs. So, and you again,
God, it
this-
still sounds like
hundreds-
it though, doesn't it? Just doing that, even though you played it out of time.
Kind of, but if you don't do the walk down, and if you don't do the timing, right? Then you can kind of get away with it because those, again, 12 notes, there's only so many ways you can put them together, right? But it is those relationships it's those relationships to one another. And when you do some interesting things, right? So there's a number of things where you can go from a major to a minor, and you make that change, and then you can modulate, do a half step up or whatever. Those are the interesting rule-breaking things that can make songs interesting. Or you can break the rules altogether, like somebody mentioned White Rabbit earlier from Jefferson Airplane, and that really breaks the rules in a bunch of different ways.
It's kind of like an early Tool song.
Yeah. it's more like a club, really. It's a hammer. No, but anyway. But yeah, there's those relationships. But the trick here, right, is not just doing this as a matter of inspiration, but a matter of construction, right, and using it as a tool. So, as it appears they have done. Anyway, back to Mark. So go ahead.
At some point, I'm assuming we're going to do the devil's interval here if we're talking about things that were replicated over and over and over.
Well, I was thinking about that, Crow. That the whole people have known the power of music for centuries at this point, because just like what you're saying, the church, of course, had a conniption about the devil's triad and all that. You know, Diablo and Musica. You can't use that, or else you're summoning evil or some bullshit. But all the way up to the 20th century when jazz started, that was the latest thing that everyone was throwing a fit about. But I think if I had to guess, that's about the time that the music industry started to coalesce and figuring out, hey, we can manipulate people with this shit.
Well, think about, what's a good with Black Sabbath. There's a good example. They made good use of the flatted fifth triad known as the Devil's Interval, and their whole brand is basically diabolic. And they claim this goes. Well, they claimed that they first, I think it was old Latin monks or something, came up with the idea that was something you didn't play. So it was known well before these bands came, using it over and over. I mean, that's a big part of blues too, I would estimate.
Yeah, and then of course blues. Well, blues and jazz, they kind of both came around the early 20th century, but jazz became a bigger, what would you call it? Like in society, it was the bigger thing at the time.
It was more authentic, didn't it?
But then in the 40s and 50s, blues started coming in, and then you had that new next generation, this new crop of musicians picking up on the blues thing and turning it into what would become rock and roll.
A lot of it was driven by youth power as well. We were looking into, and a lot of the case studies we used, regardless of the time period in relation to media, a lot of these sort of social engineering projects, whether it was an entire genre or a band, a lot of it was driven by youth power. So it was always sort of the chosen demographic would be the youth of the day. So this is why you got weird situations like, I believe that in Chicago, jazz is seen as more authentic than blues, despite, the fact that they both exist there and have had their success in Chicago, and a lot of that was to do with jazz was already doing it something there, but then the youth that came afterwards sort of helped lift the blues to the surface. And so a lot of the time these social engineering projects seem to rely on youth power, which I think, like Wayne was pointing out before, is sort of like an alchemical process, this idea of like energy. You need something behind it to fuel it.
And blues also was, during the time, very easy for it's very easy for beginning musicians to play. In a sense, it typically is just three chords, mostly 1, 4, 5.
Punk rock.
Right, 1, 4, 5, and it is this, when you solo over it, really it's again a pentatonic minor scale, so 5 notes rather than the typical 7. Gives you it's a lot easier to play, and the way the patterns develop on a guitar fretboard makes it a lot more.
I love me some pentatonic.
Right, a lot more accessible, right, to junior or beginner musicians, neophytes. Becomes much easier to play. Yeah.
Well, it's also easy because you can memorize that little pattern, and then all of a sudden, I've taught this to so many younger guitarists. It's like, hey, memorize this, and then your first note, if you keep to that pattern, guess what? You're in key.
Exactly. And in fact, I've done that exact thing with people who are like complete neophytes, right? And you can just you can play a 1-6-2-5, right, pattern, and just show them these 5 notes, and as long as they stick on those 5 notes, they can play a solo if they've never played before, right? It's a very, very simple pattern to do, and people can immediately become involved with music, and that it's a great teaching tool. It's great to get people excited about it, but it also, again, it makes it very accessible. There is a certain, especially when you aren't skilled and you're not overthinking it, sometimes that allows expression to come out more easily. And so blues has often been described as being very passionate, right? Very colorful, because they're not really thinking so much about playing. It doesn't take as much skill. They can really spend a lot more time just in the expressive part as well.
You know,
It also helps on. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Well, I was going to say it's interesting how these things catch on, because I was reading through the paper. You know, the idea of analyzing how a thing comes to be and then what's done with it. The claim, and I don't know that this is true, but it sounds semi-acceptable. The claim is that the Devil's Interval was never really played in popular rock until Black Sabbath came along. But since I play guitar, I would take umbrage with that a little, because I believe there is a flatted fifth in Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze. But if you follow the thread of these ideas, which was why I think the paper we're looking at is so interesting, there is a thread. Like, if I'm not mistaken, Primus wrote the South Park theme, and that's full of flatted fifths. So you can see how they start, but it's almost like you would never, what am I trying to say here? Like, you're never going to see a band like Electric Light Orchestra, you know, making famous song with flatted fifths, if you follow my logic there.
Right.
Yeah, and the Purple Haze chord, if I remember right, it's like a 7-flat-9. It's a dominant, extended like dominant 7 chord, but it does have a similar feel to it. It's got that tension, right? That really.
It was always E, wasn't it? With it, or was it?
It's always E.
There's no
maybe
flatted
with Jimi Hendrix.
I'm pretty sure there's a flatted fifth in the opening to Purple Haze.
There may be, but it's actually, but it's a E7-flat-9 is the full chord, the way he voices it. But again, he was playing upside down and backwards.
That does happen.
It's got that tritone thing to it for sure, though.
I learned it upside right and frontwards.
I play it on a Les Paul.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, so we jump up to the next section here. Philip Tagg, Introductory Notes on the Semiotics of Music. This second text is part of an ongoing project to produce a textbook on the semiotics of music. Semiotics are signs, signifiers, often universally recognized as connoting something more. For example, a fire alarm ringing out means smoke, smoke means fire, fire means danger, and danger means get to safety. In this example, the fire alarm uses semiotics to indicate or instruct get to safety through a chain of connotations. In this text, Tagg elaborately discusses the use of semiotics or signs in music, creating a category system of the different types of signifiers. First of all, Tagg explains anaphones. There are 3 different types of anaphones in popular music, the first being a sonic anaphone, which is something in the music which relates or refers to something non-musical. For example, a guitar riff which sounds like a plane taking off or a motorbike starting up could be described as a sonic anaphone. The next type of anaphone is a kinetic anaphone. This is where something in the music is relating to movement. For instance, a drum beat that sounds like footsteps could be described as a kinetic anaphone. The last anaphone is a tactile anaphone. This is when something in the music represents or relates to touch. The previous example of walking can also be applied here, as it is something of a physical nature involving touch. Sometimes anaphones can occur together, and when all 3 are present at the same time, this instance is described as a composite anaphone. Beyond anaphones, Tagg discusses more semiotic terminology applicable to popular music recordings, such as genre synecdoches, style indicators. What is it? Synecdoches?
Synecdoche, yeah.
I feel like I'm back in school because there are many words here that I have never heard before.
These are like terminologies made from about the 1980s onwards, because they're specifically created for popular music, and no one cared about it until about the 1980s. So this is the kind of terminology which has been removed from the education system since about 3 months after I finished my master's.
Well, damn.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as well as style indicators and episodic markers. A genre. I'm sorry. Pronounce this correctly so I don't say it wrong 100 times.
Synecdoche.
Synecdoche. Okay. A genre synecdoche is something in the music which relates to a musical genre. For instance, a certain instrument and the style in which it is being played may be key to a specific genre of music. This informs the listener of a genre subgenre and perhaps establishes a certain aesthetic attached to that genre or subgenre.
Like a tuba going ba ba ba, right? Gives you the cue that you're about to listen to some. You're about to listen
a little
to
drum roll before reggae.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but that tuba pa, that little 3/4 thing tells
Like
you
a
right away.
waltz.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to listen to a Bavarian
exactly.
waltz and drink beer. Yeah, exactly.
A style indicator is an aspect of the music which suggests a home style for the recording, the home genre of the recording. The syntax could be indicative of this, as previously mentioned with the folk example when discussing Longhurst's structural dimensions, but also instrumentation and performance techniques used can indicate a specific style. An episodic marker is something in the music which highlights an important moment, like a change from verse to chorus, or perhaps that a guitar solo is about to take place. This marker can be, and often is, something small, perhaps as small as a pause, brief silence in the music before the next verse, clearly indicating progression or change to the listener. Tagg's explanation of figure and ground is useful for semiotic analysis when considering the above terminologies, also including those provided by Longhurst. Figure is what is in the foreground of the recording, and ground is what is in the background of the recording, in the vertical layering. The figure and ground can shift or change as a song progresses, and this occurrence is described as syncretic. Synchrisis, pronounced syncresis. Gotcha. Okay, I'm learning things today. This is wonderful. Through these methods and approaches, it can be realized that some, if not all, go hand in hand, complementing or overlapping one another and enabling the listener to subjectively yet accurately describe and analyze exactly what can be heard in any popular music recording. All right, Mark, go ahead. Let's let you start this one.
I'll use an example. I'll use a cliche example because it'll be the Beatles. A lot of my case studies at university were the Beatles because they're right on the doorstep. I have access to as much information as I need. But everyone will know this one, presumably, the song A Day in the Life from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album. The section of the song where Paul McCartney, Billy Shepherd, is about to come in and sing, isn't he? Woke up, got out of bed, that part of the song. So there's an example of pretty much all of that paragraph, that section you just read. That alarm clock, while we were in university, we read over a previous student's essay, and she had wrote about a 3,000 word essay on the 2 seconds worth of audio with the alarm clock. And she made a very convincing argument that all of these terminologies apply because it's whoever decided to put that alarm in. This is the best example I can think of in popular music because it sets a scene. Because as soon as you hear the alarm clock, instantly you know where you are, which would be a bedroom. You know what time of day it is. It'll be morning. You know kind of the layout of a bedroom anyway. You know what the person you know that there's a person there because why else would an alarm clock be going off? You know what the person will be doing because they'll be waking up out of bed or they'll already be awake. You know what they're about to do as well. And because this is the modern era now, it's been 50 years roughly since they recorded that. It's not a digital alarm clock. It's I don't know what you'd call it, I guess a real alarm clock with the
bell.
the metal bell. Yeah. So it gives you a time and place. So in other words, this 2-second clip of audio sets an entire scene in your head, ready for Paul McCartney, Billy Shepherd's old habits, Billy Shepherd's lyrics and vocals to animate the character within the scene that just got set up in your head. So then you follow with that scene in your head, you follow the character because he does the lyrics are pretty much describing what he's doing. Woke up, got out of bed, dragged a comb across my head. Eventually he's running out the front door and getting the bus.
And he drops
it's a brilliant piece of audio.
He drops that antiphone in there as well.
Exactly.
Right. It's just he nails it right in the time. It's so expressive. Yeah.
Which is proof that whoever decided to put these little audio clips in there definitely understood everything that's laid out in this document I've typed here, which, and like I said a moment ago, that this terminology only started really being developed in the 80s so far as the wider public are concerned, and really it was only being taught in a mainstream capacity, I guess, while I was at university, because they were sort of testing the water with the stuff while I was there. We were the guinea pig class for the university to try and my lecturers were essentially designing a popular music studies undergraduate degree of its own, and it got about 3 months of life before it all got shut down. So this terminology here is like it didn't really get to take off, but as you can see, it definitely does apply.
Can't be showing the man behind the curtain, right? That's what's going on there.
This dismantles it, and if it dismantles like what we're doing here, we can easily break down, like I just did with the alarm clock, but just as much as you can dismantle something with this terminology, like Wayne was suggesting before with the elements, it also, you can reverse that process and reassemble it, or you can create from new using this terminology. And then, of course, you can, if free will, I guess, you can encode whatever the hell you want, which kind of suggests that they do.
Yeah, and I think, in fact, to me, Mark's story about them shutting this down, that the entire program is nearly as fascinating as the topic itself.
Nothing to see here. Move along.
So much money they spent. They renovated the entire creative department of the university in the Christmas, because I finished my master's degree in November, because a master's is a full year, not an academic year, and then I finished in November. And then over Christmas, they spent a ton of money renovating the entire department, the campus I was at. And then in the new year, they started a popular music undergraduate, or they started it before Christmas. They started September, and it ran. They had Christmas, and then when they came back, they continued the popular music undergraduate, and the original undergraduate degree I did was done away with, but was replaced with a purely classical music undergraduate degree. And then, of course, my lecturer, my main lecturer, he had originally designed the master's degree I did. It's completely his. It was the only one in the world that you could do this. And I was a part of the last class to graduate from that. And it seems that perhaps because dissertations for a master's degree, the title of them gets read out in the graduation, and of course all the higher ups of the university are at the graduation, because it's like a giant cathedral. So the title of my dissertation had the word rhetoric in it, because we were all being educated in rhetoric, and because that's the last component to this methodology is rhetoric.
Oh, it's your fault. Yeah.
Me and a few other people had rhetoric in our dissertation titles. So I think because that happened in January, just after they came back after Christmas, I think that's why all of a sudden things started getting turned on its head. And I was also volunteering at the university as a research assistant for my former lecturer. So I got to see some of the behind the scenes and the dirty tactics I spoke about before to try and get rid of people. In the end, they just paid people off, made them redundant. They moved, before that, they moved the popular music office into the electrics, the main room for the electrics, with the main electrics for the entire campus. And my lecturer just wasn't happy at all with any of this, and anyone associated with my undergraduate and my master's got done away with. So none of this information and either of my degrees are available. And they also had 4 years worth of students lined up for the popular music undergraduate, and every student pays between $9,000 if you're a local student, $9,000 a year. And if you're a foreign student, I'm pretty sure it's something like 20 or 30 grand a year. So 4 years worth of students, and they renovated the entire department and then did away with it within about 3 months.
What year was this?
This was 2000. The end of 2018 was when I finished. So the beginning of 2019 was when they did away with everything.
If it seems to me, if you get people putting a system like this together that gets very sophisticated, you'll be showing one of the primary programming methods of society. I mean, this could be this could be ported right over to television. And for that matter,
Absolutely.
Look
Oh
what
yeah,
rap,
this is what we did first.
yeah, look what rap is doing. Rap is like a simplified version, or a
We
more
actually
basic
used
version.
rap. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right. We started with video, using 50 Cent, actually, the rapper 50 Cent. That was one of my earliest lessons, was looking at his, is it Candy Shop, his famous song, the music video for that, because we started with visual. And I realized retrospectively that I think one of my lecturers, because he was teaching us this as like a toolkit so we could do this independently, and then we would bring our work to him, it seems to me like he was collecting data. Because if you have all these students, like 30 students per class, armed with this terminology, doing these types of analyses, and then handing them in, and no one's really corroborated anything with each other, if you see any crossover between what people have interpreted, it suggests that there is a message being communicated. And that did happen in class once with a particular music video and pop song from over here. And for about the majority of my undergraduate, 90% of my class thought this was nonsense, but they did it for the grade. And in the final year, when that happened in class, where we all independently analyzed this video and we all came up with the same thing, but with different signs and symbols and audio indicators, everyone kind of looked at each other like, oh my God, this is actually communicating something between us all.
And there it is. This is all part of the hidden language of the controllers. This is what they use as a programming template. And they could all read this stuff and understand exactly what it is that they're trying to push there. And they could use this to perform social engineering feats. And I think we see that going on in spades, especially like in the music industry and in the entertainment industry as well. Like Crow had mentioned, this could be used all over television and stuff, and it is. And even down to the soundtracks that go along with these TV shows, and the movies, music tracks in the background, even that stuff. Like all of these things are programming motifs that are being used. They could incite different emotive reactions from the audience by just changing up the music going on in the background of the story. And, one way to really drive this whole point home is try watching a television show without any background music playing, like in the television show. It's a completely different experience than what it is if you're watching it with the actual sounds and sound effects and stuff. Yeah.
If your mind's not led astray, you can't fall into it. But it's occurring to me, he's pointing out that when he got into this, all these folks were classically trained. That's kind of a tale in itself about how this has been employed. The complexity and the skill required for many of those classical pieces is far above almost anything popular music in the rock era got to. There are some exceptions maybe, and you could argue maybe with the Beatles, they got that complexity in the recording studio, if you wanted to make that argument. But there's been a progressive downhill slide in the complexity. And by the way, part of the reason the Devil's Interval was outlawed is because the church had made it dictate that music's supposed to be sweet and uplifting. So that's part of it, because it's ominous to play that flatted fifth. But my point is,
that's the saddest of all.
Right? If you take if you take classical music all the way through to rap, you could almost draw a 45-degree angle drop in the complexity and what it takes to put music together. And after all, even the names, I'm pretty sure 50 Cent doesn't have plural money.
But this is to my point is why that the fact that they withdrew and closed this program is very telling, in that they kind of gave them the keys to the kingdom and showed them how to do it, and said, whoa, wait a minute,
back up, time out, hold on.
No, not that. Now we were only fooling.
But what if it was a test to see how do normies react if they're told? Will they get it? Will they figure it out? Or
did Tavistock show up and say, hey, man, pull the curtain back. People can see the dude.
Well, no. What I'm saying is, what if they did it the opposite way, just to see what would happen if we actually explain this to people? Will they get it? And then once they got their data, like, nah, they don't get it. And then that's why it got terminated in a weird way. It could be looked at from either way.
Perhaps. I mean, I was there was only about 3 people in the class including myself. There was me and 2 girls who seemed to really get it, and we moved over to the master's degree. And on the master's, my lecturers they highly valued us because we got it. Like, because it wasn't like there was no, like, I to this day I have an immense amount of respect for the people who have taught me, because they didn't have to. They went, sometimes they would have to do things off the books, sort of like on the master's degree. When I visited the Casbah, that was outside of university hours, because we could just be people. We're all adults. We can just go meet up and go to the Casbah, but we would incorporate that into as a part of the research later on, because no one can stop you. But we didn't tell anyone higher up, because it was kind of like, let them catch you, that they don't need to know, that kind of thing. My lecturers were pretty I don't know, I don't know if they're sort of awake, say, to use a overused term now, but I don't know if they were awake to a lot of this. But I have my suspicions, but I don't want to like email them and be like, do you know Paul McCartney's dead?
Did you hear the alarm clock?
Hey guys, do you work for Tavistock? That kind of thing. You don't want to be doing that.
I'm not sure they do, because this is something I've told Baldini. The very last day I was volunteering there, before I found out that it was all over and done with. The lecturer I was who taught me for the most part on my undergraduate was a woman, just a few years older than me, and she used to stick these popular culture references all over the office. And on the last day I was there, she stuck a notice on the inside of the door while I was in there, and I read it. And it was only when I actually listened to Crow 777 radio where you mentioned Tavistock, I remembered it, because I was like, I've heard that before, or I've seen it. And on this note on the door, it said something to the effect of, the Beatles were a Tavistock construct directed by Theodore Adorno to socially engineer an entire generation. And I remember looking at it and thinking, that's insane. And I looked at it and laughed. And then she looked at me and just kind of like raised her eyebrows and smiled. And I couldn't tell if she was being serious or not, or at the time. But retrospectively, I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah. She just told the straight up truth right there, brother.
And I was already familiar with Theodore Adorno, because we used him as comparative material, because publicly he was quite critical of popular music and the Beatles in particular. But then he was hanging out with them.
There's another thing that could be studied here. How come Paul McCartney's music has gotten crappier and crappier the older he's got? From the classical era, we could make the argument that by the time Beethoven was going deep, he was knocking out some of his best tunes. Because all like, what's Jimmy Page's deal? Writes the most popularly played song in the world called Stairway to Heaven, and now he shows up kind of, sort of. There's a whole argument to be made that much of the popular music was not written by who we think it was
not
written
at all.
by.
I was thinking about that the other day. Why is
I think it's
McCartney's
demonstrable.
entire catalog, and I know I'm probably going to piss people off who are fans of this, but like post Beatles, I couldn't give a flip if I never heard anything by Paul McCartney again. Like whatever was going on in the Beatles was phenomenal stuff, but like the albums immediately afterwards, it's just like, so what?
There's another rule of thumb that I've been thinking about. It has to do with studio time. You ever hear the stories about Queen? Like, all these other bands are scraping for studio time, but Queen's camped out because they just got studio till the end of days. You hear a similar thing about Fleetwood Mac. There's certain bands, and the Beatles was one of them. They never had to worry about studio time. They freaking, the studios was there to do whatever they were up to, right? It's almost like you could correlate studio time with what the band's up to. I'm just saying.
Well, the first song that everybody learns on guitar, "Smoke on the Water," is about studio time.
Good point.
Just saying.
The thing with Queen, though, it's all about the technology level at the time. Like Queen in the early 70s, when they start recording, was really light years ahead of what it was just 10 years earlier. So they were able to do more, probably with less time.
It's just hard to come out and say where I'm at, because I was big into music, and at some point you just realize if it's the lock and stock, guess what? It's the barrel too.
Well,
and if you look at it in any other way, you're not being honest. And, you could probably find exceptions, but I'm just saying the big momentous moments in my musical life are primarily constructs to do what they did, to do effectively what they did.
Having been in that part of the industry for better part of 4 decades, there are a lot of running jokes about it. For example, I mean, it's called Neiman Marcus for bums, right? You have this incredibly expensive gear, and your client inherently has no money, right? Unless they have a record label behind them. So the old running joke goes, how do you make $1 million in the recording industry? Start out with 5 million and open a studio.
And that's true.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
I think the silver lining to some of this, though, because some people are probably like, I can't listen to popular music ever again. The silver lining is, like some of this is pointed out, it's you can subjectively reinterpret what you're being presented with, because a song or a recorded song isn't really complete until someone's listened to it. And it's like the best example I had given to me was by my lecturer, that if the last song you listened to with someone before they passed away was, say, Let It Be, does the social engineering get to you, or does that song always remind you of the person that passed away? Right, so that,
in a way, that is the social engineering, though, because it was tied to the nostalgia, right?
Right.
Everything always comes full circle, and there's actually, even, I know exactly where you're going with this, and this is my problem. I don't take the music that I used to live for and love in the same way that I used to, but it does still. I'll hear a song and I'll remember a better time, so the nostalgia is inseparable from it. But then you got to keep in mind things like, what's a good example? The band America, who were all British. How in the hell did they write Prince's death 43 or whatever years it was before the fact? In Ventura Highway, Prince, Purple Rain is heard for the first time. And if you look carefully at that verse, they're using his supposed aliases and other things, but it's talking about a falling star ending too quickly, and it's also admitting that he didn't die if you closely look at it. And I don't want to be subject to that nonsense. So that's my problem. And I can still listen for enjoyment, but it doesn't come close to meaning what it once did to me. But nonetheless, the nostalgia will always be there.
That's right. You can sort of the part that it can do, that knowing this stuff and hearing it, is you can sort of, if you do hear the social engineering aspects of, say like a lot of the modern hip hop or whatever passes as music now, a lot of it will have sort of sexual innuendo or something like that. Like none of that can kind of like it can't really program you, in a sense that like, look at the amount of effort that this document lays out that they have to implement in order to make this work, and the amount of music they have to churn out all year, every year, as a constant bombardment. That alone suggests to me that this stuff isn't powerful in a individual sense, because if that was the case, Tavistock would have had the Beatles release one single, and then that would be it. We'd all be fucked.
Well, there's another band that I've stumbled across that is really the easiest view of how you come to grips with pretty much the biggest bands in the world. They're selected for the most part. Probably Bloodline. That band would be Supertramp. All right. So they lift their name from a novel. Anyone could go look it up. The story we're told is that some Dutch millionaire loves a guy or two in the band so much he pays him $1 million to put a band together. They put the band together and they go out to tour, and it's a freaking disaster. So they pull him back. But what we now know is that Breakfast in America is a prelude to 9/11. It's unfreaking deniable. But beyond that, if you go back to see how it was done, the studios were all ex-Masonic temples. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I don't remember if this is correct, but I think it's the Master Builder number 22 years before the 9/11 event. It's released to 33 or 22, I forget which, but it's all just laid out. But what it shows you is the band are just a bunch of contract stooges that can play music. That's what it shows you.
Oh yeah, and if you really want to destroy a boomer's day, just go back and show them how Laurel Canyon, like everybody in this, all the musicians in the '60s were all connected to the military-industrial complex. Every one of them. If they made any splash in the '60s, they were directly connected to the military-industrial complex, and mostly spooks. So you can ruin their day.
You cut me to the quick, mate. You cut me to the
quick. Yeah. At Laurel Canyon, oh man, yeah, exactly.
We looked into that a little.
You wonder why Dave McGowan got cancer and up and died.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even as an early musician, even in my early teens, when it came to the Beatles, my take on it was, I didn't really care much for it, but my thought was, man, they're shitty musicians, but they're great songwriters. That was my take, and it wasn't until later I realized why. So
George was the only one who seemed to have a progression. I noticed when I listened.
Yep,
he's the only one who
took it seriously too. Yeah, and
he has a very natural. Even his solo career, there's a kind of natural progression to it, isn't there?
So I was friends for years. And in fact, I still am with the guy who did front of house for Ravi Shankar for decades. And he would tell stories of how Harrison came and studied sitar under Ravi Shankar. And he was a very serious student. And at the time, though, when he at the height of the Beatles' popularity, not really a very good guitar player, according to all the stories. He was not very good, but he was intent on trying to become better. He was trying to actually learn the part. To actually be a good player, and he took it very seriously. Just interesting side notes. Yeah.
All right, we ready for the next section here?
Yeah, next one will be a bit. It's short, but it's a little slightly more complicated. But I can probably explain it afterwards.
Roland Barthes, The Grain of the Voice. This third text can provide relevant information for particular song choices regarding the singer's voice in relation to the genre and its usual characteristics. The information provided is on the terms genotext and phenotext. Geno being generative emotive, engaging the listener actively, and pheno being phenomenology, non-emotive, engaging the listener passively. Geno could be described as a writerly text and pheno a readerly text. Both of these texts are in reference to the tone, quality of the specific voice in question and are subjectively decided upon through personal interpretation by the listener. Do you want this next section in here too?
What's that? Oh, this was for you guys in the Skype chat, but I mean, if you think it's relevant to, I think we've kind of covered it actually in between the different parts. Pretty much it's just about the social engineering aspects of it. You can see already how this layout it can be used to socially engineer or program people, the listener. So before I continue, I forgot to say that the second text, the Philip Tagg introductory notes on the semiotics of music, is available for free online in PDF format. I checked the other day, and it's actually an updated version. It should be version 3 by now. I was working with version 2 at university. So if anyone in the live chat listening wants to check that out, they can. It's all there. That's the entire text that we used at university for semiotics was Philip Tagg. Now, the grain of the voice, that the part you just read now, to explain that better for people, would be my example would be for me personally. I've always kind of like, this is going to sound backward, but I've always kind of liked Bob Dylan's voice.
Okay, that's weird. And he sounds just like that in person.
He got worse as he tried to hold up his end for the chief guy. But anyhow, go ahead. I was hoping you were going to use Rod Stewart. So go ahead.
So the reason with this, so I would describe in this terminology Bob Dylan's voice as a genotext for me personally, because it's, like I say, it's generative or emotive. It engages the listener actively. Because in my case, it reminded me of, because if we're being fair, he can't sing. So for me personally, it sounded like the connotation behind it in a semiotic way is that tone of voice tells you he's like one of the common men, sort of thing. Like he sort of relates to the common man and also the genre of folk in his early days. Like it sat in the right context with folk music, and then having that voice that wasn't this sort of clear, perfect, in tune voice has that kind of there's a level of relatability that engages, say, a listener like me that might be from a common poor working class background. You can see how if they know this information, then that would be on purpose, because how else would, if 90% or more of the world's population are working class or poor, how do you speak to them? And the accent will play into it.
Folk music. That's
where
how.
would you put Rod Stewart? Would he be Gino or Fino in your view?
For me personally, I do like his voice. I think if I was to sit down and maybe run this analysis through one of his songs, like let's say Maggie May, yeah, in that circumstance, I'd probably say his voice is a bit of a Gino text, because it has that kind of it for me personally anyway. I don't know about anyone else listening, but it has that. There's a uniqueness to his voice, the tone of his voice and his delivery. I suppose his diction, or in Bob Dylan's case, lack of diction, it conveys certain things in a very small way. So someone just lacking diction or mispronunciation, or even the accent behind it, like putting on a rural accent, would suggest for a lot of people sort of common, like a relatable guy, like just the average Joe from the street, sort of that sort of thing. So you root for them more. The Beatles are actually probably, let's be honest, the most famous example, because every time you heard them speak, they sounded like me.
Those lads from Liverpool.
Exactly.
Yeah, and one of the ones in the U.S. that's been characterized that way, and again, just a complete construct, is the brain fart. The Boss.
God, I could never
Springsteen.
stand that guy.
God, he's just so annoying at every level.
Yep.
And every song is just hideous. Yeah, and
they love him on the East Coast.
Yeah, they do.
Where I am, when I went to high school for a semester here, they called him the Boss, and everyone loved him. I never got it, man.
I didn't either. That's just bad.
I've never got it.
Yeah, just bad. But he has he definitely has that sort of sort of
Blue
Gino.
collar.
Yeah, that sort of the Gino text, and baby, we're bonds, like he's taking a dump. Yeah, it's like oh,
he
plays the part well
all the time. So
yeah.
there's this very clearly shows there's a reason for that. There's a reason why Kurt Cobain sang with such a gritty voice.
Right.
Exactly.
It's kind of you could see how the programming motif just goes into every aspect of it. Simple things like this genotext idea, like Springsteen with that gritty voice, Kurt Cobain, same kind of thing. You could see this, reflected in all different genres of music, and the way that their voice comes across, it reinforces the idea behind it. Like with Cobain, for example, that reinforces this whole rise of this genre of music that is the grunge scene in the early to mid 1990s. And this is a shift over from what it was previous. So you could see how it's used in the context of switching over the social programming for that generation.
Definitely switched there, because a buddy of mine, amazing bass player, was in a band called Bangalore Choir, and they were part of that hair band scene. And their album dropped the exact same day as Nevermind. And yeah, exactly. And
radio was not on your side, and I would suggest that grunge is just a reworking of punk. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I would prove it with the names of the two seminal albums from the two genres.
Right. Yeah, his joke was that he thinks he thinks that album went vinyl. Vinyl? Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's his story. Is that they're very popular in Germany, but yeah, their album dropped the same day as Nevermind, and that didn't go too well. Yeah.
If Cobain's the fake father of fake grunge, then now you know why he fake swallowed a shotgun, right? Because you can't have the father of a genre being like 60, and ruining his own genre. He got to go.
And actually, And he telegraphed the Cheeto Jesus in becoming president, right? So again, just shows you that the whole thing is scripted.
Jesus.
Yeah, right. But he did.
Talking
He
about
said,
the orange one, I'm
yeah,
guessing.
yeah.
Rubbed
Exactly.
him hard enough we could get
Yeah.
that powder off him.
Yeah, he said in like 1991 or 1992 that, we need somebody for president like Donald Trump, right? Because he thought that would be super cool. I'm like, oh, come on, man.
And it speaks to youth as well, doesn't it? Because if you think about that, like the like we were saying about genotext with the voice, not only does it speak to like the working class, but like I was saying before, you need that youth power behind it to fuel it, to like really drive it up the charts. You need youth behind it, and I think that's what the use of these voices does. Like when you think of someone like Janis Joplin, her voice, there's no mistaking it, is there?
But isn't that remarkable? I mean, at every level, that nobody thinks about it, is that the youth, as you say, the youth movement, they always accept whatever the marketing machine tells them is, anti the man.
As long as it's
right?
different than the previous one, because they've
Right,
got to
exactly.
have, this is your music. That's not mom and dad's stupid music.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. So it's it's so anti-establishment, but it's the establishment selling it.
Well, it's repetitive too.
For
You
being
turn back in the
anti-establishment, do you know how
day
many
when
millions that cost to be able to be on your iPhone right now?
But think how easy it was back then. Everyone listened to the radio, so they played Janis Joplin 50 times a day in every market. It wasn't that difficult a thing to get to catch on.
Humor is also a good one, actually. If you think about humor and the Beatles, a lot of modern day comedians say that was sort of the first time they saw comedy was seeing the Beatles interviewed. And when I watch those interviews, to me, because I'm from Liverpool and I know the character of the people who are here, there is an intrinsic sense of humor. And so when I watch them, I just see four Scousers. Scousers are people from Liverpool, by the way. Sorry. That's a sort of unofficial, like Paul McCartney is a Scouser, or was.
Do they seem genuine though, Mark? Like, do they seem like they're from Liverpool? Like, no, they really are from here. That's
absolutely.
what people are like. They're pretty normal.
Yeah, I think they would probably. That's why they were probably picked to be from Liverpool, as in they really are from Liverpool. But I think that plays into why they were picked, because they knew that humor would really help, because they needed not only for this to work with youth power. I think with the Beatles, they also needed other generations, like previous generations, to get involved as well. So there's like the iconic moment where John Lennon solidified that with the Royal Variety Show. Now this is really clever what they did, but it is also typical of Scouse humor. Is when they were on stage and they introduced themselves, and he said, "We're the Beatles," and then he said, "All the people down here, clap your hands," and then everybody clapped their hands, and then he said, "Now all the people up on the balcony, rattle your jewelry." So he's like highlighting the class divide between
he's mocking
in society. So it's really clever. But my lecturer says he remembers his dad didn't like the Beatles, but as soon as he saw that, he was like, he had a little look at the TV, like, he's all right, that John Lennon lad, and that was it. It was like he accepted them because he was like, he gets it.
Yeah,
he's just told us the class divide, and he highlighted it on TV on the show that everybody's watching, because there was only like 3 channels at the time. So, and this is right by Christmas, so everybody's at home from work and everybody was watching it. So it is so perfectly constructed.
And and they all always drop the little truth bombs here and there. The supposedly late John Lennon, famously noted for saying, I think the world is run by insane people for insane ends, and you'd be called insane for saying so. And he said, I mean, he very clearly said it, and yet hard to get more compromised than that guy.
He also pointed out that rats, stars backwards was rats.
That's right.
He did that on the air, by the way.
With what's that guy's name? He's one of your guys, isn't he?
Yeah, I can't. Dick Cavett.
That's right. And if you think about working class hero, I don't know if any of you know this, but John Lennon grew up in a middle class home. So when I listen to that song, the final line where he says, "If you want to be a hero, just follow me," and he repeats it to my ear because I'm from Liverpool and I know he's not he wasn't raised working class. That sounds to me like a bit of Scouse humour, like a bit of tongue in cheek. It's very characteristic of people from Liverpool to do that sort of thing, like a little bit of tongue in cheek humour. But people outside of Liverpool, of course, don't get that, especially if they don't understand that he was raised in his auntie's home, which is still standing, and I've seen it. Even by today's standard, it's a nice house.
Well, here's an interesting question for you, since you're from the place that these four lads are supposed to be from. Does James Paul McCartney seem any different than post 66 Paul McCartney?
You mean visually?
Well, visually, I've seen enough pictures to tell me something's up. But
yeah.
I mean, personality-wise, does Paul McCartney, as a persona, does James Paul McCartney, the young bubblegum one, the one that everybody called the cute beetle, does that guy seem like a typical Scouser, as you might say, compared to Paul McCartney, who went on to form Wings?
The thing is, it's Billy Shepherd. I don't know if anyone actually knows, but he is provably a real person, or at least was, because you can get his records from back in the day. His band it was Billy Pepper and his Pepper Pots.
Yeah.
And you can still get their vinyls online now, which is where they say
Pepper.
Sergeant
What?
Pepper. Yeah, what a coincidence.
What?
Coincidence.
And you can see his photograph on the cover, and someone who guest lectured one of my master's degree classes, he actually got to see them perform, and he said that they did cover Beatles songs, early Beatles songs, and Billy Shepherd did sing the Paul McCartney songs that they played in their set list. And as far as the personality goes, I don't doubt that Billy Shepherd is from Liverpool. If he isn't from Liverpool, then he's one of the greatest actors ever, and I've seen some of the movies he acts in. He's not a very good actor.
Okay, that's what I was curious about. Did they pick somebody who would be able to fit in if anything truly did happen to James Paul McCartney? Did they pick somebody who wouldn't really have to fake that aspect of it, which is interesting to hear from somebody, because I think you're the only person I've ever known who's from Liverpool, so it's the first time I've been able to ask that. I know Mark legit. Is from Manchester. We've talked about it a little bit, but that's obviously, I know how England is. People are very, not necessarily night and day different, but there's little cultural differences between the different major cities.
Oh, yeah. England.
And they get angry at each other, too.
If anyone in the live chat is from England, they can probably confirm that people from Liverpool. Now, Liverpool, the city itself, is respected, say, in a historical sense, partially for the Beatles and the football clubs or soccer clubs, but also because historically we're a maritime city. We were the main port for Britain, and we were second city of empire, so we're a very historical city. So there's a respect for the city, but as far as the people from the city go, Scousers, we're not so highly thought of, because the media has sort of trained people to think that we steal, or I know Baldini is familiar with the Hillsborough disaster, which was blamed on us. There's a problem with Liverpool at the minute with the current narrative going on, because we don't really there's not too many problems for me. No one's asked me to wear a mask. I've never had to. I see people wearing masks, but they don't care. Like, they don't seem to buy the narrative too much, or if they do, they don't care if you wear a mask or not. Like, there's a problem with Liverpool in that we don't trust government or media, because we know that they lie about us because of things like the Hillsborough disaster, or say Jimmy Savile is a perfect example, because that's 40 years worth of harbouring and facilitating by the government, the mainstream media, and the upper echelons of the medical industry. So that's multiple prime ministers in both political parties. So Liverpool has been victim of this through the Hillsborough disaster. So there's a little bit of a lot of the country sort of it's ostracized us a bit as a people, not as the actual city location, but as a people. There's a bit of a stereotype that carries weight over a lot of us, but Ireland, Scotland, and Wales are all fine with us. We were actually built by the Welsh.
That Savile thing, man, that is proof positive that evil goes on the inside and is allowed to happen. I mean, just think about the
No
number of
doubt.
people that disgusting thing interacted with for decades.
Well,
Yeah.
and the level at which he did it. Yeah.
Well, all the way up to the
Right.
to the top
To the-
of the chain,
yeah, to
food
the
chain
crown.
in England, as far as the
the
public is
crown,
concerned.
yeah.
Yeah, he hung out with the crown, received gifts from the crown, and God only knows what was going on.
And to
But
play it
Jim
back
will fix
in,
it, right?
What show did he host? Apart from Jim will fix it, what show did he host otherwise?
Oh, it was a
Top of the Pops.
Top
yeah,
of the Pops, yeah.
yeah, the pops, yeah.
Yeah.
He was
So,
an arbiter of
which
taste as far as
musicians-
music is concerned.
So when these guys were young, all these different musicians, all these guys and gals when they're young, they had to deal with him for decades.
Well, yeah, Johnny Rotten, or whatever it is, John Lydon, he
Yeah.
spoke or tried to speak publicly about it at the BBC. And the audio is available now online. You can hear it now, but this was in the 70s. And he says if he made a movie, the person he'd like to kill in a movie is Jimmy Savile because he gets up to all sorts of seedy business. And then he says, oh, but you probably won't air that, will you? And she says, the lady interviewing him says, well, not if, it's not provable or viable or whatever. And he said, oh, then it probably won't air then. And then they
Wow.
shelved it until after, of course, it all came out. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, look, John Lydon actually tried to tell everyone what was going on.
Surprise, surprise, right?
And oddly enough, though, he's like back in the news almost every day. He shows up in my news feed like it's somehow relevant. I don't. I wouldn't count him
There's
as
another
a good guy
construct,
either. Yeah, exactly.
Another construct from the get-go. This simple punk band, which is going to be re-echoed by Kurt Cobain's band. They can't even change the name of the album. And there's this magical guitarist who actually knew how to play, which was against the rule. I was in a punk band. It was against the rules to know how to play guitar.
Or even tune your guitar.
Right. And that music still holds up, and they still won't admit who was playing the guitar.
Yeah.
He's a put up too.
I once
Oh,
actually recorded a band who didn't tell me that they wanted to be punk, and we got through, and they said, it sounds too clean. I'm like, what?
Hey, this sounds good.
That's a-
You get
That's a
three
true-
chords. They can't be in tune, and you can only have been playing guitar for about 6 months.
Yeah,
That's how punk worked.
Well, from a
Exactly.
studio point of view, and I'm sure Baldini can back me up on this, that sounds really good, especially for the late 70s. That album,
Yeah.
never mind the buzz
It
cut.
sounds
it's
good
well done.
now.
It's
well
double
done.
track
Yeah.
guitar. Like I can hear it. It sounds good. It's done to 2-inch tape, which means it's a high quality.
Natural tape compression. Yeah. It's got that sound.
Well, I don't mean that. I mean it wasn't done on like 16-track half-inch. It was done obviously on 2-inch, which is the superior. That would have been.
No, so I'm
available
saying
to them.
natural tape compression. And they probably went through Rupert Neve's stuff, or Trident, or
It's got a
something
big
like
in-your-face sound, so you're probably
Yeah.
right there. Just the whole thing, like that production. It's not slick in the sense that it's got like tons of stuff going on, but overall sound quality, it doesn't sound like a punk record. It sounds like a major label release. Which guess
that. Because
what?
it was.
It
Oh,
was.
it was.
EMI, baby.
Same with Blondie. I mean, they're supposed to be a punk band. Come on, man. you can listen to that. It's,
Playboy model first.
Yeah, you could argue that Blondie started rap. Actually,
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could make that
Man
argument.
on Mars went to
eating cars and snorting bars or whatever
and-
the hell
yeah,
she had to
exactly.
say.
Yeah, she did that.
She was
But
punk
now
at
he only
first,
eats
Generation X. She was punk in the beginning.
right. At this
Then
point,
she
guys,
was just
I'm gonna have to bow out. Just not feeling well, but I did want to say that we should have Mark back. He's got a phenomenal. This is just one of the topics. He's got a number of really good papers on, including the Gaelic and some background into not only linguistics and linguistic determinism, but a number of these interesting topics. So I'd love to have you back, guys. I'm gonna have to bow out. Really sorry. Just
Thank you.
not holding up tonight. And my apologies. Take care.
Well, you
guys.
have a good night, my
Very
friend.
generous, Goldie, anytime.
Yeah, I have some good days and then some not so good days, and I had a few good days in a row, and this is not one of them. So I apologize. I'll everybody have a great evening, and I'll see you again later. Thanks.
I'll see you later,
Good night.
Goldie. Thanks very much.
Well, we got about 20 minutes left. Mark, what else do you want to get in here? Since this is definitely your topic, I'd love to hear some more about what you want to get in as far as symbolism and all that. We could probably touch on modern music. We've been talking a lot about the Beatles, but good God, the crap that's being spit out today, and it may not even necessarily be the music so much, although I did a show last year with Mark Devlin where he threw 4 modern songs at me, and he wanted me to help break them down with him. From a studio person's point of view, because I'm a nerd about like studio stuff and gear and all that. I just love that shit. And the one thing that was common between all 4 songs, and they were all within the last few years, was they all had this weird drone to them. Like I noticed it had a very hypnotic effect, which a lot of older music did not. They might have a flow, like say Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, might have this ebb and flow kind of thing going on but it was more of a beautiful thing. It was, you can get carried along with that kind of thing. But these things had all of them had this drone, like it was trying to hypnotize you, the way the beat was and all that kind of thing. So maybe we could touch on the way they do things in the modern world.
I noticed the lack of human touch. That's the biggest thing I notice in modern music is there's no handmade feel to any of it.
But like I think when we had the semiotic terminology for anaphones, the different like sonic anaphone, kinetic, tactile, or composite, some of those I think would be interesting to look at music over maybe the last 5 or 10 years leading up to a time of social distance, and to see if maybe the lyrics left out, or even the music, but mostly the lyrics left out the idea of touch or being close to someone, or
good idea.
Maybe the voices sound like muffled, like like mumble rap, an entire subgenre. That's like someone wearing a mask speaking to you.
Bob Dylan was mumble rap for boomers.
Well, when you think about it, I think I've said this to Baldini before, that this has been known for a very long time. When you think that nobody would have accepted, say, going from Billie Holiday to mumble rap in just one jump, like within the space of 1 year. Society would have been like, no, we're not accepting this at all. This is where the Overton window comes in.
Well, I don't think it would have been taken seriously. It would have been like, is this a joke?
Exactly.
Because there was still musicianship all the way up until, like really the past 20 years is where you really saw the musicianship take a nosedive. Because even in the 90s, you had people still, like you had bands like Dream Theater coming out and stuff like that actually did okay, and they're phenomenal musicians. They're all Berkeley musicians. So it was this weird mix. But then once you get into the 2000s, it starts plummeting down into everybody sitting in front of a laptop and pushing buttons at this point.
I think modern music maybe got like derailed a bit by hip hop, because I've noticed when, and this isn't to hate on hip hop, there are some songs I like called rap hip hop, and I'm sure people listening, there's a lot of hip hop and rap songs you like. Like none of what I'm saying is, I'm not in any way trying to tell people what they can or can't listen to. Like if you like a song, you like a song. That's just that's just it. It's fine. But I think with rap and hip hop, because when you look at the progression of music over since say the early 1900s, when recorded music started beginning and taking large portions of the population through radio listening in, over time you see that it's almost like they're slowly pulling things out of the music till eventually, so like they would take out, like Crow pointed out, the classical music is so much more complex, so much more intricate, and there's more attention to detail there. And then with recorded music, I mean, the song length alone of the average track would be maybe 3 minutes. There's already something that's been removed. And then when you say before about most songs being 3 or 4 chords, well, something else has been removed then, hasn't it? And then harmonies, when you think about punk rock, they took out the vocals, so they've removed harmony. And then maybe even when you get to rap and hip hop, well, where the hell has melody gone? You've got rhythm. A lot of rap and hip hop has very good rhythm, because they still need something in there that's familiar to the listener's ear to draw people in.
Well, you notice how clever they were with rap and hip-hop early on? I guess it would be more considered hip-hop. How they were sampling some of the best productions of the 70s from R&B or disco. They were taking some of the best of the best of the best that was ever put out in that kind of thing, taking those beats and some of those sounds. And what was the other thing? Not only were they getting excellent production, they were getting things that would have been recognizable to a lot of people.
Exactly. They needed something familiar to the audience, like maybe like you said, excellent production. and they needed rhythm. They needed something musical about it because they weren't able to jump from one thing straight to like Billie Holiday to mumble rap. They couldn't make that leap, so they have to go, okay, what can we take out gradually over time? So each generation, the youth can kind of get behind it, and then over time, you can slowly just remove some of the musical aspects that actually make it musical to begin with. Yeah, that actually makes it music, and then eventually
like harmony and melody. Is there
yeah,
anything
exactly.
Is that around anymore? I mean, at best we
I
call
try
a
to
lot
write
of
it.
modern music poetry to a beat. Maybe would better describe it.
Yeah, and I think that's why rap and hip hop was probably the sort of like the one they were betting on, where they were like, this will be it, and that's why they got all the high production and all the rhetoric that goes along with it. You know, this idea that they were just like, I don't know if this will get you censored at all, but the sort of BLM, Black Lives Matter.
Well, it's
sort
exactly it, right? They're promoting
the rhetoric.
They're promoting
behind
the core, of course. That's exactly what it is.
So
all
they're saying
lives
white
matter.
privilege, while every hip hop band that made it was getting just so much money thrown at them for production value, and then afterwards they're like, it's black empowerment, and you know, white people have white privilege, and you know, it was NWA singing "fuck the police," and
well, look where it's gone. Now we've got Snoop Puppy Dog has gone from supposed gangster to game show host to pushing the mask mandate and getting tested on a mainstream regularly aired TV show.
He's on TV adverts over here as well for I don't know if you have Just Eat, the fast food delivery service.
I don't know.
TV adverts for Just Eat.
Well, I think that guy's doing anything to make. I don't know why he would need the money, but it seems like he's doing anything for a buck anymore.
Well, he wanted to be Snoop Lion, didn't he? But he didn't get promoted.
Well, there's a lot of those older rappers who are now like my age or older, which is, you know, pushing 50 or older. People like Ice-T, Ice Cube, like a lot of these guys that were like the most vile in the 90s have now turned around and they have freaking acting careers and all that. They have more acting credits than they've got out. Right, they have more acting credits than they have albums. That's what's funny about it.
Yeah, I can tell you why Snoop is famous. Very few people know why. He's Dutch. There's the line. But you know, it'd be interesting to do another one is the early guys in the most violent band, gangster rap. I forget what MW. I don't know what it was. Straight out of Compton. He dies of a fake disease that doesn't exist. He dies of AIDS. All the way back there. So it shows you the construct.
I'm actually glad you brought up. Someone mentioned Ice-T a moment ago. That reminds me of a little another part of this semiotics here. It's a very small part. It's called it would be like a double entendre. So a double utterance is the word we use, or the phrase double utterance, because Ice-T had a song called, I think it's called "Played Yourself," which we looked at university, and I think it's like his big hit, if he had any. That was his big hit, and he samples James Brown in the background, and double utterance. What that means is, like you said, a lot of rap and hip hop was taking samples from artists from the past. So what that does is reinforce their message, because they're tying in an old generation into a new movement. So they're not only getting the youth, the modern youth, behind the new genre, they're also getting say the boomer generation with like sampling Zeppelin or someone like that. You can draw Zeppelin into it, like Black Dog got sampled quite a lot, but with you can pinpoint a specific demographic. So that Ice-T song, "Played Yourself," he samples, or I don't know if he made the decision, but whoever made the decision decided James Brown, because James Brown, it ties into a specific demographic and age group, doesn't it, of American population, so the African American population of a previous generation, because the message of the song is he's basically listing off like crimes that, like, sort of average everyday crimes that say like the narrative that police would arrest African Americans for, but they wouldn't arrest white people for. And so the message of the song is basically saying, you know, if you're doing this stuff and you know that the police are going to pick you up for this, but they wouldn't do that to a white guy. You've played yourself because you already know and you still did it. So you played yourself. So he's kind of got like it's almost like a positive message. Like there's a moral to the song, but having James Brown behind it is saying, not only am I saying you played yourself, but James Brown, the godfather of soul, he's saying you played yourself. There's almost like that little reinforcement of a iconic voice from the past or an influential voice from the past to be like who's important to that area of to that demographic, saying like I'm not just this new guy spouting some shit about you playing yourself, but the godfather of soul also thinks you're playing yourself. Like that's kind of the connotation behind sampling a song like that, and that would be called a double utterance.
And it also fits the Tavistock. Well, I was going to say that it fits the Tavistock rule. You've got to remove variety, which is seen in obviously cars and the colors of cars today. But the other thing you have to do is take a section of time previous, which is why we have the decades, and loop it back. So not only have you reduced variety for something totally new to come along, you've done all the things you're mentioning, and you're also reducing the variety, and then you're looping back so that the time you have now is not totally unique and progressive on its own, but looped backwards into a thing that's already been.
Mm-hmm. Tying in as many people as you can to whatever the social engineering is you want to put out there, or the message, whatever message you want to communicate. If you can take in as many listeners as possible, that'd be a way to do it, wouldn't it? Is appeal to what they liked when they were young. Like you said before about nostalgia, if you can, like that would also, the James Brown track being in the background might provoke nostalgia and do the same thing as what John Lennon did when he said rattle your jewelry. The previous generation go, oh, he's all right then. So the same thing happens with someone like Ice-T. They'll hear that James Brown track and be like, oh, he's all right then.
Yeah, it's just kind of a wink and a nod to the previous generation in a certain way, to try and gain their approval in a certain type of degree here. And, it also, like I said, it'll intrinsically connect the two generations together. And, that's an important idea, too, because not only do you have the old school thought, feeding into this whole thing, you also have the new generation, the young energy feeding into it. So it's one of those things where it does invoke the nostalgia type feelings in the older generation when they recognize that beat. And a good example of this, I would say, is, Vanilla Ice. Ice Baby. That's a good one for many of us, in our generation that most of us on this panel are. That from the Queen song as well. It's the same thing. He sampled a portion of the Queen song. So it kind of, pulls these ideas together in people's minds. And that's the whole thing. It'll incorporate that nostalgia type programming in people as well and pull it forward into the new generation and maybe making the new generational music more acceptable to the older crowd as well.
But
so
that's why that becomes the proof too, though, Wayne, if you think about it, because we have a thing called copyrights. We're all aware of it if we create on YouTube. So somehow, for some reason, all these guys were just allowed to rip music and sample it. And it made the news here and there. I think Ice Baby was one of the big examples. But the point is, there was a rule where if you did any more than a 10-second sample to further a narrative or something, you're infringing a copyright. And
That's
so
right.
for rap, the proof of the construction is that all the law, it's like the mask right now. It's against every law and every right you have, but that's all been suspended, which proves the construction. And that alone, the sampling of older popular music into rap is proof of the construction.
They used to go to 8 seconds of a sample and loop it because technically that was legal.
That was also the limitations of the equipment at the time, because I lived through all that.
That doesn't meet the spirit of the law either, though, because once you take 8 seconds and play it twice, you're up to 16 seconds.
Yeah.
The original was a one-time reference, so no matter how you slice it, it comes up peanuts.
That's just how they got away with it, was just doing that 8 seconds and then looping it, and that's how they, for a while, got away with it that way. But I don't think it lasted too long. I think it just lasted long enough for them to do what they needed to do. And then after that, I think was when you started getting collaborations like Aerosmith and Run DMC, and that kind of did the same thing, didn't it? Merges
God,
audiences.
what a sellout that was.
That's also when the
Yeah,
whole
honestly.
digital, everyone throwing a fit about digital at that point, when they started realizing that things could be ripped off and record labels weren't getting paid for shit.
Yeah, it's an interesting contradiction when you look at it, when you combine these musical styles that way, and that collaboration between Run DMC and Aerosmith really kind of changed the face of popular music at that point. That was like a very groundbreaking collaboration that they did, and it brought these generational factors together in a way. And, we saw what that produced. That was one of the big things that really pushed forward the whole hip hop movement, that type of a genre in music into the popular culture. That made it mainstreamed it. Let's put it that way. That was the video and the song that really mainstreamed hip hop in the American pop culture right then in that era. And from there, you see how they shifted the Overton window further and further and further, and used these sampling ideas even more so, or these collaborations with other artists even more so. And from that, we get to where we're at today, where, in my opinion, a lot of the hip hop and the rap music is a far cry from being actually, how do I say this? Yeah, music. How do I say this without being...
Well, I mean, if there's no melody and there's no harmony, I think you could use a dictionary to find out whether it's true or not.
Right. And
that'd be why they need collaborations, right? I just thought that must have been a funny obstacle behind the scenes for people like Tavistock with this setup, when originally someone like Elvis Presley could blend multiple genres into his one sound, and that way he could hit so many demographics at once. But then obviously, if your aim is to start taking things away from the music over time, you're going to be left with no choice but to sample or feature a guest artist or collaborate in some way, because if you're taking out parts of the music, you're not really going to be able to tick the boxes of multiple genres, are you?
No, I mean, eventually, what do your genre is a tone, like each band gets a tone. Is that where we're headed? Oh, look, this guy used distortion on his tone.
I hope not. Just a whisper track.
Well, we're winding down here. Mark, is there any last points you want to get in before we sign off?
I think that might be good. I think I just heard Rose's voice, and it reminded me. I was like, I think I just spoke over Rose the whole time.
Oh, well, I'm hearing some background noise. Are you guys hearing?
No.
What?
Oh.
No.
Shoot. I don't know what's going on. Must be me then.
All right. Well, let's think about signing off. Crow, you want to talk a minute about the episode we just dropped a little while ago?
299 is up live. I put it up a little early because we got a short month here. Clive DeCarl's back. It's a really good episode. Talks about selenium, how it relates to a lot of things, addiction being one of those things. And Clive seems to have helped a lot of people. He's helped me in more ways than I can count. What I learned from David Avocado, Wolf, and Clive has people I'm responsible for recognizing their children, and I can't tell you how big a deal that is. Clive, simply by turning me on to magnesium, saved me from a surgery on my hand. It goes on and on. These things that they're doing with products from nature, it's a big deal, so we'll continue to cover it. But the episode we just did with Clive, I don't know, Jason, I'd say it's as good as any we've done with him.
Oh, yeah. No, that was lots of info packed into there.
Yep. So anyhow, 299's live. Oh, and by the way, hour one's on YouTube for a change.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see if it lasts. I had to work half a day to get it there, but we'll see.
Well, we thought we'd take a chance with this one because we didn't say anything too crazy, I guess.
Covidius minimus.
Yeah, we didn't really go there until hour 2 when we started talking about the immune system and all that. But all right, that's it. And then, of course, 300. Crow and I are working on hopefully a humdinger for that one.
That should be a humdinger if we can pull it all together. We're going to do a 299.5 in between with another real life case of a registered nurse who stood up and walked the walk. So there's a lot of women standing up in a world full of left, showing us some right. So we'll run 299.5 as we wrap up for 300. And 300, we're going to try to pull so much of what we've done together to show you how big the damn blanket is, how long the blanket's been around, and how much of the world it covered. You want a hint? All of it. A damn long time ago. As long as we can see backwards. How's that?
Definitely.
That's where we live.
Rose, what are you and the Great Baldini doing tomorrow?
Oh, we are doing the Poppycock Report, episode 7 of season 2 at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern. Hope to see you all there.
Wayne, you got anything you want to tell anybody about?
Yeah, I actually just recorded yesterday with a pleasant lady named Judith Quoba, and her YouTube channel is called Night Flight. If people want to check that out, my interview with her will be posting on there sometime soon. I'm not sure exactly what day she's putting that up, but we just recorded that yesterday. So that was a good conversation, interesting conversation. Also, people could check out, I will be posting part 3 of my Unseen Forces series on my YouTube channel, which is Alchemical Tech Revolution. So people could look forward to that being posted here sometime within the next 5 or 6 days or so. I would say probably sometime before then, but you know, I try not to put a time frame on myself for these things because you know, I tend to be busy at times, so it's hard for me to really you know, plan on posting at a particular day or time. So, but that's all I got going on for now.
And Mark, are you going to start getting out into the wide world of podcasting and interviews and things and stuff?
I hope to. I know the amount I've spoken, and I probably suggest that I'm confident, but I'm genuinely nervous the whole time and introverted, very introverted. So this Baldini's probably said, but I think what I've got here is probably important enough to at least. I'm a writer, so I'm unemployed currently, but I do writing, and I'm about to be published. So the published writing will be fiction, but what I'm doing at the moment that we read tonight that I typed up was there's some examples of what I send Baldini all the time. He mentioned before that I have a little bit of knowledge of the Gaelic language because I'm trying to teach myself Irish Gaelic and Spanish, and I do a lot of reading. Anything you guys mention on Crow 777, if I can get hold of it, I do, and I read it in physical copy as well to make sure that I have it.
Wow,
so
in Gaelic?
hopefully, yeah. I decided because I have I have red hair and green eyes. I have Gaelic heritage, so I decided to learn Gaelic, and then I learned that Scottish Gaelic was revised. And Irish Gaelic was made illegal by royalty, English royalty. So I thought, well, Irish Gaelic will be the older form because Scottish has been revised. So I decided to teach myself, and it's unbelievably difficult, but there's some really interesting literal translations. The basic translations are just straightforward, like Diarith means hello, but its literal translation means God to you.
Give us a full sentence in Gaelic. I'm kind of curious to hear the accent.
Oh, a full sentence. Gorab Ma'agat. Gorab Ma'agat would be thank you, or may good be at you is the literal translation.
How do you say crow in Gaelic?
Oh, you know what? I was actually genuinely going to look that up earlier so I could tell you when I was on, and I've not. I know what raven is because I did a little study on. There's a weird link between the symbology between the raven and the cormorant in the Gaelic translation, and it went down a weird road of like the just sacred geometry and to do with English cities and stuff like that. With the language connects the two. It's almost like if you know Gaelic, then you would see the symbology, and so the raven would be Fiach Dove. It's close to crow.
That's very interesting, and I would venture to say if you look further down the road, studying the Gaelic language, you'll find ties to the language of the Gypsies, which is another interesting crossover, which relates back to what they call the green language or the language of the birds, or the many different other names that they give this sort of secretive language used by many of the people at the highest, most levels of the secret society. So that would be, in my estimation, why they would have maybe tried to ban like the Irish form of Gaelic and that kind of thing, and how it transformed.
It was made illegal, and all of the texts and scrolls were all. You've heard of a book burning, but there were book drownings of Gaelic texts.
Well, I gotta. So, are you actually reading the shows in Gaelic, and where does that go?
The shows? Sorry, what do you mean?
Were you saying that you were transcribing the shows that we do into Gaelic?
No. When I listened, I decided to teach myself Gaelic, and then I noticed you mentioned a few times about, like, say, Kennedy. So Ken being head or one, like the one being like not the number but the individual, and so I thought there's something to it. And I actually sent Jason an email a few weeks back about Keanu Reeves. You might remember it, Jason.
Yeah.
And Keanu Reeves is actually a Gaelic sentence which means one or with you. Keanu Reeves. It's not spelt the same, but phonetically it's identical.
And it means what?
Wow.
One with you?
One or with you, and the you is plural you. So the decision he has in the Matrix of red pill, blue pill is: do you want to be the one, or do you want to be a part of the you, which is plural you? So that's what his name is a phonetic twin with in Gaelic, Irish Gaelic.
So his real name directly correlates into the Matrix.
Amazing.
It's weird, isn't it?
Very interesting. Well, we'll have to do this again, Mark, because you seem to be a fountain of knowledge of very interesting things, and this is a subject we're all interested in. Music pretty much touches everybody.
Else. Because of my age, I'm a little like you guys. Genuinely, in the past year, have completely turned my mind around. You keep saying be higher minded, and because I had a crash at the end of 2019 where like my mental and physical health crashed. And then that's when I started listening to Crow 777. And genuinely since then, I've picked up reading and writing and tried to get myself published. And I've been doing so much research using everything I was taught at university. And that's kind of what's led me to this moment now, sending Baldini as much as I know, or as much as I think I know, maybe, because, you know, I'm behind a lot of people in this community because I'm 28 years old. I've only got so much experience.
Well, that would show me that you're ahead of the curve, though, because the average person that gets into this quote-unquote truth movement type stuff doesn't really start till usually around their mid-30s. So you're a bit ahead of the game as far as that
Imagine being in the millennial generation as well and having this knowledge and not relating to anyone in your generation.
That's got to be tough, man, because I know
people taking selfies on TikTok.
Hey, man, I know some dirt that's older than me, but I don't relate to very many people either, so it's not a lot different.
That's something that crosses generations, I think, that not being able to relate to people. So
also, Wayne, I wanted to say your channel is brilliant. Anyone who's not subscribed to Wayne's Alchemical Tech Revolution, go there, because I just listened to the Melchizedek, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the Manly P. Hall text. It's that I bought the book afterwards and was just like, what the hell?
Oh, it's very eye-opening for sure.
I've read a
few.
few.
You see, I found a couple real doozies too that I'm going to be digging into. So
thanks all of you for genuinely the past year, like even the lockdown. I've told Baldini this past year that has been the best year of my life, just because I've figured out this is what, like, I know who I am now and I know what's going on around. I have a firm foundation, even though, like I said, I'm unemployed and circumstances technically aren't ideal because of what's going on. But you guys are the real deal. So thanks very much.
Well, I'll make you a deal. We'll provide free hour twos, which we don't do to anyone, for our own protection if you put it into Gaelic and want to put it out to that community, because I happen to know there's not that many people in the world that speak Gaelic, and I also happen to know that it's a very independent-minded community, so the odds that censorship would come back on me are slim.
I would accept that, but I'm not fluent in Gaelic. I've been teaching myself.
If the day
about
comes.
If the day comes. Oh yeah. If I can speak fluent Gaelic, I'll do it. It's a if you try learning a few sentences, there's an app for online, actually. You can get it online, called Duolingo, which is really good for being able to hear what the language sounds like. And you can identify straight away, this is like insane for a language in the British Isles. It's a very difficult language.
Oh, it just occurred to me, Rose. We should have mentioned Melanie.
What?
I'm sorry, not Melanie. Beth Martin.
Oh yes,
Okay,
you were just on her show. Let me go ahead and grab the link and I'll put it in chat so people can go check out that interview. And I also just posted Wayne's channel as well, so people can subscribe.
Crow did a live
All
stream,
right,
and they
well,
predominantly talked about the law and everything, right?
You're talking about me and Beth Martin. I don't know. Rose was there. What the hell did I talk about, Rose?
It was law.
I can't keep track anymore. It's too much.
It was
law.
primarily on law.
We do a
It
few
was.
things.
Yeah.
I
I'm
just
adding
did
that
Beth's
link
course
now.
as well. Beth's course is really good. The Primal Power course that Beth has just delivered for the first time. I was just on it, and so anyone listening, it's worth parting with fiat currency that's got no intrinsic value for.
We just did something on that too. The moment you
Yes.
said intrinsic, I remembered a title I wrote sometime in my life.
KL.
There it is.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it, guys. We went a little over, no biggie. But thanks for being here. Sorry about last week. We had some things come up,
Oh,
and
that's
then
okay.
that'll do
Baldini said it's fine. Don't worry. Thanks for having me. I'm genuinely flattered.
that. By the way, Mark, do you have any contact info you want to give anybody, or are you just kind of hanging out for now?
Yeah, people want these PDF documents that we've used tonight. You can contact me at markfrancisbloom@gmail.com.
All right. So that's the documents we went. Well, he's got 4 documents he sent over. We only read from one of them. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you again next week. This was a great chat, and this is one of my favorite subjects, by the way. So we'll definitely do more on music because music touches everybody. Let's just be honest. In some way, shape, or form, everybody's got a thing for music, whether it's reminding them of when they were
Universal
young.
language.
Yeah, it really is. No matter what style you're into or styles, you're going to feel something. And to hear what really goes into it, especially anything that's in the mainstream, it's quite a learning experience. But all right, guys, I'm going to sign off. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Cheers.
By and by, manifest inside of me, my angel. The universe will speak, manifest inside me, my angel, for all to see. Living story. Take my hand and let's fly away. Manifest inside me, my angel. The universe will speak, manifest inside me, my angel, for all to see. Inside me, my angel. The universe will speak, manifest inside me, my angel, for all to see, manifest inside me, my angel. The universe will speak, manifest inside me, my angel, for all to see.